Hey, what is up, everyone? It's Jenny Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach, and you are listening to the LDS Mission Podcast, episode number 219, Competition versus Cooperation. I'm Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, and whether you're preparing to serve a mission, currently serving, a returned missionary, or a missionary mama like me, I created this podcast just for you. Are you searching for epic confidence, ready to love yourself and to learn the how of doing hard things? Then let's go. You totally already have what it takes to step powerfully into your potential and never question your purpose again. It's time to embrace yourself, embrace your mission, embrace your life, and embrace what's next. Hey everybody, welcome to the podcast. How's everybody doing today? When I recorded the intro to this episode, it was really funny because I had this realization. It's not lost on me that the topic of this episode is competition versus cooperation. And here I'm going to put competition and cooperation in competition with each other. I'm just like, how ironic is that? That's so funny. So anyway, I just had to share that little insight with you because I think it's almost like we can't help it in our existence as humans with these lower brains that like to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy, that it's pretty difficult to not want to pit things against each other and to put things in competition with each other. And sometimes we get a little bit of like a rush or a thrill from putting things in competition with each other. So we're going to talk all about that and what some of the pros and cons might be to doing that, to using competition versus cooperation or vice versa. Maybe we would like to introduce more cooperation versus the competition style. We're going to talk all about what I think those two things mean. Of course, nothing I share on here is an exhaustive list of the way to see things or the way to do things, but hopefully just creates a good resource for you to kind of think about the way this is showing up in your own life, on your mission. Maybe you're a mission leader. I kept thinking that this could be particularly applicable if you're a mission leader or if you're a zone leader or a district leader or a sister training leader. So anyway, I'm kind of excited about this topic. As I've shared with you before, sometimes episodes that I share with you are like kind of mulling in my mind for a while. In fact, I have an episode about expectations that's been kind of bumping around in my mind for a while. And then sometimes I just have like this idea and I have this realization and I'm like, that's such a good episode. I want to share that. And so that was actually the case with this, the competition versus cooperation. And, so we're going to jump into that in just a second, but sometimes I forget, like many of you are, you're just new to the podcast, or maybe you just were really interested in this particular episode. And so you decided to dive in and take a look. And so I want to make sure that you know, and that I keep shining the light about what it is that we do here is making sure that missionaries of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, both missionaries preparing to leave, currently serving missionaries, and returned missionaries, have all of the mindset and emotional tools that they need to absolutely create the mission that they want. Okay? This is by no means going to make your mission easy like a piece of cake, because that is not what the mission is designed to do. In fact, a kid who came home just a few weeks ago in our ward, he's like, no, it was hard. And I don't want to sugarcoat it. But what he said, and I wish more missionaries would share this, is he said, I had no idea how hard the mental load would be, and the emotional load would be, the stress, the overwhelm, the doubting oneself, the wondering if you're good enough, the sort of like Am I Christlike? Am I not Christlike? How do I feel about these goals? All of those kinds of things just totally come into play. And so that's what we're doing here. And if you're here, thank you. Like, this is important work to be doing. And so a couple things I have coming up, if this is interesting to you or interesting to someone you love, is that we're just getting down to the wire to sign up for Mission Prep Plus, which is my on Zoom live back and forth on Zoom classes that I teach. Picture it kind of boot camp style, just a short hour or 2 hours each night, mostly 1 hour. We just have a couple extra master classes in there where we go over all this stuff. And you get one sort of thing out of it when you're just listening to me teach the concepts, but I can guarantee, I've been working with a few missionaries and RMs. I always have a handful of one-on-one clients that I'm working with all the time. And it is something completely different to take the tools, to ask the questions, and to apply them in real time. Or if you're getting ready to go on your mission, to start to think about, what about the mission is going to be hard for me? Is it going to be hard if my companion doesn't get out of bed? Is it going to be hard because I'm going to be missing my boyfriend? Is it going to be hard because my parents don't support me? Is it going to be hard because I usually question myself and my abilities, right? All of that kind of stuff we dive into. There's no question that's off the table. Like, you can ask any question and we get you help right there. And if you can, it's been amazing to watch how, if we can address some of these things and even just talk about them before, how your brain and your body will know what to do when you get out on the mission. So that's pretty awesome. I've also done recently a couple trainings via Zoom on the mission to whole missions and sometimes just a zone, which has been really fun, because it's a really fun way to kind of get the word out and just get this ripple effect. I had the missionary that set it up with me. She was like, it's so cool to see the way the missionaries are changing and evolving and interacting with one another in a more compassionate way and acting more compassionate with themselves. So that is super awesome. Also, I'm going to be at Faith Matters event, Restore, at the end of September on the 25th, 26th, 27th. I'm going to have a booth there. Come find me. I'm going to have some fun swag to give out. And I just want to hear your story. I just want to talk to you. I want to put faces and names to the people that are listening. So please come find me. And I would love to talk to you there. Plus, this fall, I'm working on a live in-person event, which I'm so excited about. But I don't have all the details yet, so I can't fully reveal what's happening, but I'm so excited to have, this is something I've dreamed for actually a long time, to have an in-person event where we do, this particular one is for mission prep, but I also picture doing some returned missionary stuff in the not too far distant future in real life, in person, which is so fun. There's just such a different energy with the in-person stuff. So if you are interested in any of this, if any of this piques your interest, if you are just like, oh, that sounds cool, maybe I'd like to do that, maybe I'd like to do something like that or be involved with something like that, just reach out on Instagram, right? Jenny, it's like at jenny.theldsmissioncoach. And my name is said Jenny, not Jeannie. Is Jenny. But I think you guys, if you've been listening, you know that by now. And reach out there and send me a message. I answer all of my messages myself. So that's pretty fun. And then, or just email me, jenny@jennydildane.com. Like, one of the things that's been really important to me is I started thinking about how we sort of do a lot of mission stuff like on this mass scale. There's just so many of you. There's so many of you going and so many of you coming home. Really, in our ward this summer, we have had a mission farewell or a mission homecoming or sometimes double duty on the same Sunday every week this summer. And that's just in our ward alone. And so one of the things that's remained really a important value that I have is that you feel seen in your individual circumstance, because they're so vastly different, each of you, the experiences that you're having on your mission, after your mission. And so I want to make sure that this always here feels like you're not in some kind of cattle call. All the missionaries, but like I am here to be a resource to each of you individually. So please reach out. I would love to hear from you. Okay. Enough of my weekly soapbox of where I share how excited I am about all of this amazing work that we get to do with young adults. It's just so much fun. So where am I at in my life generally right now is by the time this podcast episode comes out, I will be in Provo, Orem area because my daughter will be going to BYU. So that is really fun for her. I'm going to take her down there, and I'm pretty sure freshman orientation is the day that this comes out. So if you're there, I'm excited for you. And many of you are starting college, maybe your first semester, maybe a post-mission semester, whatever it is. Such a fun time. And then my other daughter that's going to be at home for 5 years, by the way, she's devastated. Not really. I mean, she is also, yes, devastated because she will be our lone child at home for 5 years. And so she has a lot of feelings about that. So anyway, but she started school a few weeks ago. So we're definitely getting into the swing of things with different schedules, more routine and things like that. And some parts of it I love and some parts I don't love, as with the case with most things in life. Isn't that the truth? It's usually both all the time. Things we love and things we don't love. That's the beauty of life, that contrast. Okay, so let's jump into competition versus cooperation. So here's something. Okay, so the reason I started thinking about this was just recently I was in a meeting and we were, as I think it's always a good idea to do, is we were kind of reviewing or rehashing an event that happened this summer through our ward. Okay. And so they were just kind of asking for feedback, like what was the feedback from the kids, the youth in our ward and things like that. And after watching that event and after it happened, one of the things that I started noticing was this sort of how it was slated as a competition. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that I noticed during that time. I think it's something I'm pretty good at, is like noticing, stepping back a little bit, noticing patterns and things like that. And what I started noticing was that this was a competition. It was Survivor themed, which was really fun. And they broke the kids up into teams and they had all these challenges to do. And none of them were that gross because I know I was worried about that. But they were mostly just they were all just kind of fun, lighthearted, not too intense activities. And so I think it all went really well. But when they asked for feedback, my thought was, wouldn't it maybe be better? And I did just pose it as a question, like maybe, maybe not. But if all of the kids in the youth were working in cooperation together rather than competition together. Now, this idea comes from way back. And I was like, where did I even learn this the first time? And I learned this the first time I went to kind of an institute class when we lived in California for a few years after both my husband and I graduated from BYU. We lived in California for a few years just because that's where his first job was. And then we came back here to Boise area. And I was a pretty new mom, not that far out of school, probably 4 years out of school, had young children. And one of the people here who was just kind of trying to be nice and kind said, so there's this institute class. It's a parenting class. You should come to this institute class. And so I drive all the way up on the other side of the freeway, and I'd go to this steak center, and I would go to this parenting class by Carlene Tanner. If you're from this area, you've probably heard of her. She's famous, basically, for this parenting class. And I would go each week, and there was these beautiful angel women who would sit in the gym, volunteer to sit in the gym and just babysit, kind of like a nursery, but on a massive scale. So like not just 3 or 4 kids in the nursery, but maybe they would have 20 or 30 kids. And so I would just get to, and it was like such sacred time for me to just go sit in the Relief Society room and listen to this parenting class. And I loved it. And there's not, of course, it was years ago. I would dare say maybe 18 years ago that I was doing this. And certainly before my daughter now, who's going to college, certainly before she was born. And so I remember the feelings that I had in that class. I remember the desires that I had in that class. I remember the overwhelm that I was trying to solve for when I went to that class. But there were 2 concepts that really stuck with me. And the first concept was, which we're not going to cover today, might be an interesting topic for another day. The first topic was that traditions, kind of the little family traditions that you create, really matter. And so maybe you can take this and you can apply it on the mission. Like, what are the little traditions? And we hear about like when you become a trainer or when you're leaving on the mission, and little traditions that we have that bond you and solidify you as a family. So maybe it would be interesting for you to consider if you're on the mission, or if you're working in corporate, or you're over a team, right? What kind of traditions can you start that help kind of bond you? And these for sure should be positive traditions that build people up and help them feel seen and valued, okay? The other thing that really stuck with me, and I remember taking it home and immediately implementing it, was the idea of competition versus cooperation. Now, back then, what that meant for me is, so my 2 young boys that were just toddlers, right? That we would have, instead of me saying, oh, hey, Nathan and Danny, which one of you guys can pick up the most toys the fastest? That is competition. Instead, what I started shifting to was, let's set a timer and see how fast we can all work together to meet this goal. And so I want to just take a second and have you reflect perhaps on how do these 2 dynamics, and I've given you a very simple explanation so far, but how do you see these 2 dynamics playing out in our wards, in our stakes, in our communities, at our workplaces, in our homes, and on the mission, or in your district, or in your zone? Are we leaning into competition, or are we leaning into this idea of cooperation? And we're going to talk more about it, and I'm going to give you a few more examples and maybe some of the pros and cons. So stick with me, and let me circle back to the event that we were kind of debriefing. So everyone was separated into teams, and I'm pretty sure that the leaders probably went, above and beyond to try to figure out who would be the best people to be on the same team, so that we had sort of a variety of skill levels or personalities and things like that. Some that were, a little more outgoing, some who were a little more athletic, and make these teams as even as possible. So what you noticed is within each team, it was unifying. That team was working together to accomplish something, and you could see sort of the unity that was starting to build within the team. But then over the course of the afternoon, as we were doing this, it was started to really emerge that there were certain teams who had the edge and certain teams who ended up feeling like they weren't good enough. Okay? We started to see sort of these winners emerge and the quote unquote losers get farther and farther behind. And this started to change. You could see the morale. It was great for the teams that were quote unquote winning and not so great for the teams that were quote unquote losing. And I really just think that this is actually, speaks so much to what we talk about on here is what you focus on grows. What you keep thinking or believing about yourself creates momentum. So of course, the winning team got more and more excited and more energy, and then of course kept winning. And the people that started to see themselves as losers, of course, had less and less success because they felt less and less confident. And so whatever we're thinking, feeling, believing, the thinking and believing shows up in the way we are in our actions, and then we get that same result in a more intense and magnified way. So the winners were riding this wave of success while the losers started feeling less and less and less and struggled to really recover. And as I've thought about this, I'm like, don't we see this in the mission? Like this district is doing this and they just have this success that they keep writing and writing and writing. And then this other district, they're just not. And it's hard to find people and it's hard to meet goals and all of that. And so I think more than anything, I'm not judging anybody here. I think the event was awesome. I think it was successful. I think it achieved the things that our board wanted it to achieve. But I also am like, just food for thought. And this is what I kind of shared in that meeting is like, what if everyone was working towards some goal at the end and everybody, and I don't even know how this would work or what it would look like, but what if it wasn't like my boys, like who can get the toys picked up fastest? But let's work together for some bigger goal. And maybe that's why we, especially with the youth, right? And maybe on the mission, end up finding a lot of success and a lot of good morale when we're doing service. I've heard of certain missions where they put even more of an emphasis on service. Maybe, I don't know, I'm just literally thinking out loud in this very moment, but maybe that's why it ends up creating a big boost in morale is because everybody's working towards some outcome, some thing together instead of this district didn't do as well as this district. So I hope with kind of these, kind of ideas and these examples that you're starting to think of some of the ways that this can apply. And maybe you're a shift manager. Are we doing a lot of competitive, pit this employee against this employee? Or are we doing more cooperative kind of help and being a cooperation kind of mindset? So I kind of broke down 6 key contrasts between competition and cooperation. Okay. And so I am just going to share those with you. And of course, there's probably more ways that we could say this and lots of examples that we could use. But this is just kind of what I came up with when I was writing this outline. So number 1, competition sounds like I'm going to beat you versus cooperation sounds like I'm going to include you. So that's one of the things I noticed is like, yes, there was this fun energy and the kids were like, oh, this is so exciting and fun. And I think our like kind of lower brain kind of feeds on that. But that competition starts to isolate people rather than gathering all people in together. So a perfect example of this is like back on the playground, right? When you would choose teams. And then these teams, some teams would be really stacked and some teams would not be as stacked. And some people get left out. And then it just tends to separate us and separate us and separate us. Or maybe instead of having like teams that fight against each other, maybe you have a group project where everybody is working together and we figure out how to include each other. So maybe on the playground, it would sound like I remember when I was in elementary school, we had this field day. And when I was young, that field day was like there was a red team, a white team, and a blue team. And at the end of the day, there was one color that won and got first place. But what if all of the teams were working together to meet a point goal or something like that? Okay. So number 2, competition usually creates a hierarchy. And I've talked about hierarchies here before, but basically it puts people above and below you. Rather than creating in cooperation, we create an even playing field where there's nobody that's better or worse. There's no one above or below you. And as we think about the way Jesus Christ led his life, he didn't put people in competition with one another. He worked on making everyone feel like they had worth, that they had equal value, equal worth to them, that there was no hierarchy, that he was the same as his neighbor, and he would even wash the disciples' feet. Like there's no one above or below someone else, okay? So it could also be number 3, this competition could be like antagonism versus cooperation, which would be synergy. So when I thought of synergy, that was this idea that when, maybe you know this term, but like when a few things come together and the sum of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts. So instead of 2 + 2 = 4, 2 + 2 = 10, because we have people working together and that energy creates something bigger than what even would have existed in the first place and better than what would have existed in the first place. When we are in competition, that doesn't happen. It basically doesn't allow for 2 + 2 to = 10. It basically is like, no, there's your 2, and then your 2, and your 2, or your 3, which is better than your 2, or your 5, which is better than your 2, but it doesn't allow that for that synergy. It pits people against each other rather than bringing people together, which is so cool when, and maybe you can think of an experience where you've done this, where it's like, oh, when we work together, there is something even better that was created. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, number 4. So if we're talking about competition, I think kind of feeds into hustle and grind mindset. It was really fascinating. I was listening to this podcast. It was actually the Faith Matters podcast, and they were talking about some stuff. And then they said, well, why do we they were talking about the need for caffeine and how members of the church are often addicted to caffeine and, with energy drinks and things like that. And then suddenly it dawned on them, but why is that? Why do we feel like we have to go 100 miles an hour? Why can't we be okay with this ebb and flow of rest and then action, and then rest, and then action. And so I just thought that was so fascinating, is how can we, when we're in competition, it kind of is like, I want to beat you. I want to be better than you. I want to hustle. I want to push to get ahead, versus cooperation seems to foster more this idea where we honor everyone's gifts and talents. And I talked about that last week on the podcast, if you want to circle back to listen to that one. But I just love this idea of when we're in cooperation, when we're working together towards a greater whole, that there's room for everybody's talents. Okay, number 5 is that I find that competition creates scarcity. So even, right, like there's only one award, right, in a competition. One person gets the trophy. One person gets first place, right? There's only so much success to go around. But in cooperation, we foster abundance, which the way I like to think about abundance, it's an emotion that's created when we think there's enough for all of us and then some. Like I've never needed more than what I have. And I won't in the future either. Like there's always enough for everybody. Okay. So I just love this idea. It's like, let's create more abundance, more openness. And then number 6 is, I feel like competition creates I'm better than you, and cooperation creates we're all good. So instead of thinking you're good and I'm bad, it creates we're all good. So a lot of time with competition, and this is kind of what I noticed, is like, I got to prove to you how awesome we are. And when we're in cooperation towards something, it's like, we're all awesome. We're all good. Which I really do think is how Jesus would want us to think about it. So again, I'm not bagging on any sort of like type of competition, sports, whatever's going on, but I do think it's worthwhile to think about, because a lot of people are probably listening to this and they're thinking, and competition is super important. Like I think about my boys playing sports and facing kind of competition. It brings up a lot of stuff that you have to look at and that you have to deal with and that you have to figure out. And it makes you stronger and it makes you more resilient and all of those things. Like I totally get that. I started watching Dance Moms from the beginning with my youngest daughter. We're like, we're going to need a show now that Lydia's gone so that we can just like veg out sometimes and hang out together. And so we started Dance Moms from the beginning, which interestingly came out the year that this daughter was born. So it's really old school. But that means we have a lot of episodes that we can just keep watching for as long as we need to. But one of the things that's been fascinating watching this time around, because I used to watch it here and there, I wasn't a diehard, but is how Abby, who's the dance teacher, every time before she starts the dance lesson or the rehearsal, she puts the girls in the dance team in a pyramid. Who's on top, who's on bottom. And the way you watch that sort of erode the team aspect, they're supposed to be a team. And I think they're young girls at this point in the show. They're like 7 and 8, some of them a little younger than that. And they know intrinsically that they want to be kind, that they want to be loving to one another. But when you put people in these pyramids of high and low, and I'm better, and I beat you, and you beat me, and you're first, and you're 10th, right, or whatever, it starts to erode that unity and that team aspect. So think about how this applies on the mission. If you're a mission leader, or in your district, if you're a district leader, or again, if you're a shift over a shift, or you're over a group of individuals in the job where you work. How can we foster more cooperation? So I agree with you on many aspects that competition teaches kids how to win and lose gracefully, which is super important. Brings up an important point. When my third son, who's on the autism spectrum, I've mentioned him before, he had to learn how to let things go wrong and how to lose sometimes. It's important. So yes, I do think that there's a space for that, but maybe I just want us to consider that maybe it's not super helpful in settings that are meant to be inclusive, nurturing, or spiritual. Because the last thing that we would want to have happen is for someone to associate sort of them being less than with the truth about who they are spiritually or their worth. Okay, so maybe this would be church stuff, mission stuff, family stuff, right? That is where we can emphasize belonging and not ranking people and not putting people in hierarchies. And, but maybe if someone knows what they're getting into, if they know I'm signing up for this sport and it's going to be competitive and I'm the type of person that likes competition, okay. But maybe in these settings where we want more love, we want more compassion, we want more ideas, maybe we can foster more of this idea of cooperation. It was funny that this episode was episode 219 because I distinctly remember when I was in middle school, we had a food drive, and my teacher, I was taking Spanish at the time. It was 9th grade, but in junior high. I grew up in the Northwest. His name was Mr. Stratford, and we were in room 219. And that year, one of the years we were having, it must have been my 9th grade year, we were having a food drive. Now, this required some cooperation. The whole school was working towards getting food for the food bank. Amazing cooperation. But I thought it was funny that this was 219 because that my teacher, we would always chant 219 food machine, 219 food machine. So now whenever I see the episode 219, I think of Mr. Stratford, I think of that Spanish class, and I think of that food drive that we had. And this idea, again, of competition, because there was a competition with different classrooms who could like collect the most food. So I see for sure the benefit and the motivation, but maybe we need to like be a little bit more discerning about where it's appropriate, where it's useful, and where we're just creating more of a hierarchy of like who are the cool kids and who are the not cool kids, who are the athletic kids and who are not the athletic kids, or who are the bold kids and who are not the bold kids, right? Maybe we can be a little bit more discerning about when we want to use competition and when it is just so much more abundant and affirming and celebratory and synergistic and inclusive when we tap into cooperation. Okay, so just something to think about. I thought of this scripture in Moses 7:18. And the Lord called his people Zion because they were of one heart and one mind and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them. So there was no pyramid, Abby Lee Miller. There was no hierarchy of districts of who got the most baptisms. There was no like hierarchy of who wins and who loses and who gets the best reward and who didn't get a reward at all. Ultimately, in God's plans, we all get a reward. It's Jesus. Remember, he died for all of us. So, okay, so I think you guys get the idea, but I'll just share a couple other examples. I remember when I was working in primary one time that the people who were in leadership had on the board posted each child's name and who had memorized which articles of faith on public display for everybody to see. That is competition. It's exclusive. It's saying these kids are better than these kids. It puts people in a hierarchy. Remember, I know they used to do this with times tables as well. And it's not helpful. And maybe it is helpful, but maybe doesn't create a useful energy or emotion. Versus, I remember another time I was working in primary, and that the kids anonymously could go up and put a fuzzy in a jar based on if they had seen or performed any Christ-like service that week, right? And so the whole primary was working together to fill up this fuzzy jar. So that fuzzy jar, I think, aligns better with this idea of cooperation, of abundance. There's enough for everybody. We're working together. And unity, being of one heart and one mind. So when we're interacting with our friends, communities, missionaries, schools, wards, district councils, whatever it is, are we hoping to sort of foster this idea that we're better than others or others can be better than us? Or do we want this experience of cooperation where we're all working to build each other up? So here's my challenge this week. Notice this week when you see this competition creeping in to the way that you see things, into the way that you're doing things. And when do you want to shift into cooperation? And maybe you don't. Maybe it's an appropriate time to have competition, right? But just keeping in mind some of the things that we've talked about, I dare say I wonder if this way of competition is useful at all. I think it's something maybe to consider and think about. Or if it's always best to come from this place of cooperation. Again, also pros, you got to learn how to how to lose. You also have to learn to manage yourself and feel good about yourself, even when things aren't going your way. Good, fine enough. But maybe we want to be a little bit more discerning about when we sort of introduce that concept. Maybe we want to introduce more cooperation, more unity, more working together. Because when we choose cooperation, there are no winners and losers. Everybody wins, which is really fun, super fun to think about. So I hope that this is an awesome resource for you. I hope you've had some takeaways to kind of examine like the things that you're involved in and the way that you want to approach things. And I hope you all have the most amazing week, and we'll just talk to you next time. Serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can present a unique set of challenges, and mindset and emotional well-being is more important than ever. So thanks for being a part of this community, where we share real-life mission stories, support each other through struggles, and keep creating the mission and post-mission experiences that we truly want. Don't forget to check out the show notes for additional resources and share this episode with someone that you think might need it. Thanks so much for being a part of my world, and know this: no matter which part of the mission experience you are involved in, Jenny, the LDS mission coach, is thinking about you every single day.